Today you will get to know the story of Alex Monroe, a young American who became a symbol of rebellion on his university campus. He carried a constant anger and was known as the most radical voice of the woke movement. He had his hair dyed in vibrant colors, led protests, and never missed the chance to provoke during marches and debates. On social media, his presence was intense and aggressive, openly challenging any conservative or Christian idea. Yet behind this appearance of unshakable conviction, there was a deep emptiness that no one could see. The decisive moment came when he participated in a debate with Kirk, a meeting he believed would be just another opportunity to display his activism. However, the sharp questions and the reflections that arose in that moment began to unsettle him in an unexpected way. What seemed to be only a clash of ideas turned into a turning point, opening space for questions that would change the course of his life. And to continue with this story, make sure you are already subscribed to the channel and like the video so that this message of faith can reach even more people. Also, take a moment to share in the comments which city you are watching from.
I remember it as if it were yesterday. My life revolved around activism. I grew up believing I needed to be heard at any cost, and when I entered university, I found the perfect stage for it. I quickly got involved with activist movements that gave me a sense of belonging and power. Every day, my routine revolved around marches, rallies, gatherings, and protests against conservatives and Christians. I felt like a soldier on the front line of a cultural war, and every time I raised a sign or shouted into a megaphone, it seemed I was fulfilling a greater calling. I did not just participate, I led. I knew how to mobilize crowds, how to turn a quiet room into an electrified atmosphere, and that ability made me feel indispensable. When I was not on the streets, I was in the university auditoriums taking part in debates, always ready to ridicule anyone who dared defend Christian or conservative principles. My image spoke before I even opened my mouth. I dressed in clothes covered with political slogans that exactly reflected what I thought. My hair, dyed in vibrant colors, was like a living flag of my rebellion. My tattoos were not just drawings, they were symbols of struggle, resistance, and provocation. I liked to shock, to show that I was not afraid to be seen as radical. That visual identity gave me confidence. It was like armor I put on every day to face the world. On social media, my followers called me brave, the voice of youth, someone who challenged everything considered old or outdated. And I drank from that admiration as if it were the fuel that kept me standing. I was especially proud of a title they gave me, Deconstructor of Christians. That nickname circulated among the students and reached me like a medal of honor. I laughed out loud when someone repeated it because it confirmed what I most wanted to believe, that I had the power to knock down any faith with my arguments. Every time a Christian student walked away defeated from a debate with me, I felt as if I had achieved an epic victory. Deep down, I believed I was opening people's eyes, showing that there was no truth in what they believed. I saw myself as a liberator of minds trapped by tradition, but there was a glaring contradiction in my life. While I loudly preached about love, tolerance, and inclusion, my actions were driven by anger and contempt. I said I fought for freedom, but I got irritated by anyone who thought differently. I spoke of peace, but inside me the war never ceased. It was as if I needed a constant enemy to justify my own existence. In public, I was pure energy. When I held the microphone, when I heard the applause and approving laughter, my heart raced and I felt an addictive euphoria. Those moments made me believe I was on the right path, that my mission was important, that nothing could stop me. But when the spotlights went out and the crowd left, only silence remained. That silence crushed me. I lay in bed, stared at the ceiling, and felt alone, empty, lost. No one saw that side of my life. To everyone, I was the confident young man, the fearless leader, but inside me there was an abyss that grew with each passing day. It was a painful contrast. In the morning I was applauded. At night I wondered if any of it made sense. I tried to push those thoughts away, but the truth was that deep down I could not escape the loneliness. It was in that state of mind that something happened that would change everything. The university had organized a debate, and I was to be placed face to face with Kirk, someone I considered the perfect enemy. For me, that was a golden chance to humiliate a well-known name, to prove before hundreds of people that his ideas were outdated. I spent days preparing. I read articles, memorized lines, rehearsed sarcastic attacks. I wanted not only to win, but to destroy. My mind repeated, this will be the debate that cements your reputation. I entered that auditorium full of confidence, feeling the victory was mine even before it began. But I soon realized things would not be as I imagined. I attacked with sarcasm, with sharp jokes and arguments that normally disarmed any opponent. But Charlie did not react like the others. He did not get heated. He did not fall into my provocations. On the contrary, he answered calmly, firmly, with convictions so well grounded they pierced my defenses. It was as if for the first time someone was showing me that I was not in control. I tried to manipulate the audience's reaction, but could not. People listened closely to what he said, and that drove me mad. What had been confidence turned into shame. I felt my face burn, my body tremble, and at the same time a rage I did not know how to contain. Each response of his dismantled me from the inside, and I realized I was losing the battle in front of everyone. The sense of public defeat was suffocating. I, the deconstructor of Christians, was being exposed, not by shouts or irony, but by a serenity I could not understand. I left that auditorium as if I had been struck by an invisible blow, a blow that hit not only my reputation but my soul. When I arrived home, the facade collapsed completely. I locked the bedroom door, fell onto the bed, and cried like I had not cried in a long time. There was no crowd, no applause, only me and the weight of everything that had just happened. It was in the midst of that crying that, almost without realizing it, I murmured in a low voice, "If there is a God, then prove that I am wrong." I did not know if I really wanted an answer, or if I was merely pouring out the pain consuming my chest. But that phrase escaped like a cry from my soul, like a confession I would never have had the courage to make in public. And there, alone, between tears and anger, something began to move inside me. Something I could not explain, but that I knew would change the course of my life. That night, after everything that had happened, I could not sleep. The room was completely dark, and the early hours of the morning seemed even quieter than usual, as if the whole world had stopped to leave me alone with my thoughts. The weight of the shame from the debate still crushed me, and the words I had been murmuring through my tears, that almost desperate challenge asking God to prove that I was wrong, echoed in my mind like a cry impossible to silence. I was tired, yet at the same time my mind seemed on high alert, unable to rest. So it was in that state of absolute vulnerability that something began to happen. Suddenly, without warning, a gentle light began to fill the space. It was not like the light from a bedside lamp or a car passing on the street. It was a different kind of brightness, serene, that seemed to come from inside the room and, at the same time, from inside me. I sat up on the bed trying to understand, but the sensation that took over my body was not fear, but rather a strange mixture of reverence and surprise. My heart raced, my hands trembled, and at the same time an intense warmth began to spread through my chest. Tears came again, but now they were not only of sorrow. They were of something I could not explain, as if a river were being released from inside my soul. Then I heard a voice. It was not like the voices of my conscience, nor like when we remember something someone told us. It was different, firm, calm, and at the same time charged with an authority that needed no questioning. It said, "I have always been with you, even in your pain. I did not come to silence you, but to set you free." Those words pierced me in a way impossible to describe. I did not know if I was dreaming, if I had lost my mind, if that was a reality I had never considered, but every syllable seemed to touch directly the most hidden and broken part of my being. I trembled, sobbed, and at the same time felt a peace I had never experienced invading that dark room. I tried to find a logical explanation, something that could make me believe it was just exhaustion or delirium, but there was no logic capable of explaining what was happening to me in those early hours. I was not simply seeing a light or hearing a voice. I was being reached by a presence that knew me better than I knew myself, a presence that knew of my secret struggles, of the emptiness I hid behind the crowds, of the pain I stifled in the silent nights. And the most striking thing was realizing that this presence did not accuse me, did not condemn me, did not ridicule me the way I had so often done to others. On the contrary, it welcomed me, offering something I did not know how to receive, freedom. My whole body reacted. I trembled as if I were in the presence of a force that surpassed any human power. The warmth in my chest transformed into a sensation of being wrapped by something greater, something alive, something not coming from me. Tears ran in abundance, and I made no effort to hold them back. It was as if each tear were a weight being ripped from inside me, as if each sob were the release from a prison I myself had built over the years. I did not know if I was awake or dreaming, but I was certain I would never come out of that experience the same way. When I finally managed to lie down again, the room still seemed saturated with that soft light. I closed my eyes without fear, and for the first time in many years I was not tormented by anxiety, by anger, or by emptiness. The early morning passed, and when the sun began to rise, I felt something I had never felt before. Peace. It was not a fleeting sensation, like the euphoria of winning a debate or hearing applause. It was something deep and lasting, as if an old wound had begun to be healed. I rose different, And even without fully understanding, I knew that that supernatural encounter had marked my life in a way I could never deny. In the days that followed, concrete confirmation that it had not been mere fantasy began to reveal itself. For years, I had lived with constant anxiety, a restlessness that made me always seek more noise, more protests, more shouting, trying to drown the emptiness inside me. Suddenly, that burden disappeared. Silence was no longer the enemy, it became a place of rest. I could breathe without feeling that knot in my chest. I could walk without carrying that constant anger that had consumed me. It was as if my soul had finally found a safe place, and it did not take long for others to notice. My peers began to see changes in my gaze, in my tone of voice, even in the way I walked through the university corridors. Many were puzzled. Some asked me directly what had happened. I, who had once overflowed with arrogance, now spoke more gently, and that bothered those who expected my angry version. A friend even said, "Alex, you do not seem the same. Even the way you look has changed." I smiled without knowing how to explain. But inside I knew that this was not the result of coincidence or a simple phase. I tried to find words to describe it, but all I could say was that it had not been the product of my mind. I knew very well the difference between a thought I created and an intervention that came from outside. What I had experienced that early morning was not an invention, not the fruit of my desire, not the result of my effort. It was a divine intervention. It was something real, concrete, that left marks not only on my memory, but on my very essence. Every detail of that encounter replayed in my mind as if engraved in fire. The gentle light, the firm and calm voice, the physical sensation of warmth in my chest, and the intense tears. I could not erase any of it. It was impossible to go back and pretend it had not happened. And the more I tried to rationalize, the more I realized that that moment had been an answer to the desperate cry I had made the night before. "If there is a God, then prove that I am wrong." That phrase had been answered in a way I would never have expected, and now every time I remembered those words spoken by the voice I heard, "I have always been with you, even in your pain. I did not come to silence you, but to set you free," they became a constant echo inside me. I held on to them when doubt tried to return, when my mind tried to rationalize too much. Because deep down I knew this was not about logic, it was about truth, a truth I had denied for years, but that now had imposed itself before me in such a clear way that it was impossible to ignore. As I walked through the university, the hallways that once saw me pass as the angry activist now witnessed someone who carried in his eyes a serenity that did not come from myself. I no longer needed to shout to be heard, no longer needed to attack to feel valuable. There was something new, something alive, something transforming me from the inside out. And even though I still did not know how to explain it completely, a certainty was growing in me. It was not coincidence. It was not illusion. It was divine intervention. That conviction grew stronger each day. The inner peace I now experienced after so many years living as a hostage to anxiety was living proof that something supernatural had happened. I was not simply changing habits or trying to be a better person. I had been touched by something that went beyond any human effort, and that visible transformation, perceived not only by me but also by everyone around me, was the miracle that confirmed the reality of that encounter. And even though I did not yet have all the answers, a flame had been lit inside me, a flame I knew would continue to illuminate the next steps of my journey, a journey I never imagined living, but that now began to unfold before me, with every detail filled with purpose. After that supernatural experience that changed everything inside me, I could not simply move forward as if nothing had happened. The glow of that early morning remained alive in my memory, but along with it came painful reminders of who I had been. I found myself remembering the times I mocked Christians in debates, the harsh words I threw at them like sharp arrows, the laughter I provoked from the audience by ridiculing someone who only wanted to defend their faith. Each memory wounded me as if I were watching a shameful movie in which I was the main character. It was not easy to carry that weight. I felt ashamed of myself, ashamed of my past, and of the arrogance that blinded me, which is as if each scene reminded me of the person I never wanted to be again. But the struggle did not happen only inside me. The consequences also began to appear on the outside. The activist friends who once exalted me as a leader began to notice the changes in my behavior and in my speech. At first they tried to laugh it off, saying I was going through a strange phase. But when they realized it was not just something temporary, the rejection came as a hard blow. They began to accuse me of betrayal, of having abandoned the cause, of surrendering to the enemy. Words like coward and sellout echoed through the hallways and even on social media. People who once called me a hero now treated me as if I were invisible, or worse, as if I were a traitor. That rejection hurt. I had built my identity around that group, and now I found myself alone, without the acceptance of the people who once applauded my every word. There were moments when fear dominated me. Would I be able to walk this path alone? Would the peace I had found be enough to sustain my decision? These questions tormented me. But every time I remembered the firm voice of that early morning, "I have always been with you, even in your pain," something inside me was renewed. It was as if that memory were an anchor that kept me from sinking into the sea of criticism and rejection. The pain was real, the fear was real, but the peace I carried was even stronger, and it was that peace that sustained me. Over time, I began to realize I needed to take concrete steps in the direction of that new life calling me. At first, my steps were timid and even hidden. I did not want anyone to know, but I started reading the Bible in secret. I opened the pages afraid of being seen, as if I were committing some kind of crime. Every verse I read seemed to speak directly to me, as if it had been written for my story, for my struggles, for my heart. I discovered passages that spoke of love, of forgiveness, of new beginnings, and that disarmed me. I, who had so often used the Bible to try to ridicule Christians, now found in it the voice that guided me. Little by little, I also began to pray. They were not elaborate prayers full of beautiful words. They were simple, almost whispers, sometimes just tears turned into requests. Oh, I said things like, "God, if you are really with me, help me keep going." It felt strange at first because I did not know if I was doing it right or wrong, but with each prayer came that same sensation of warmth in my chest, that gentle peace that assured me I was not alone. It was in this process that I found a Christian community that would change my journey even more. I arrived among them with fear, expecting judgmental looks, criticism, or distrust, but what I found was the opposite. They welcomed me with a sincere hug, as if I had been part of their family all along. There were no accusing questions, no reminders of my past. There was only acceptance and care. That welcome broke me even more, because I realized that the love I always claimed to be searching for was right there, lived out by people I once attacked. Over time, that community became the place where I could grow. I participated in gatherings, listened to stories, learned about faith and about life in a way I had never experienced. More than words, what impacted me was the way they lived. They did not just talk about forgiveness, they practiced it. They did not just preach about love, they demonstrated it. And that inspired me to change too. I, who once lived to attack and humiliate, now began to help people. Small gestures that I never even imagined became part of my routine. Helping someone carry a bag, listening to a friend in crisis, offering words of comfort. I realized that the arrogance that once ruled my heart was being replaced by something simpler and truer, compassion. I wanted to share my experience not to exalt myself, but to show that the transformation was real. I began to tell, in quiet conversations, what I had lived that early morning. They were not fiery speeches, but sincere testimonies, and every time I spoke, I felt that my story could be an instrument to touch other lives. This transformation was not only visible to others, I also felt it in a profound way. The weight of the anger that had accompanied me had disappeared. The emptiness that tormented me at night had been filled with a lasting peace. I no longer needed crowds to feel alive. I no longer needed applause to feel valued. What sustained me now was something much greater, a constant presence that walked with me in every detail of my life. This liberation gave me a sense of freedom that I had never experienced. I was no longer bound by the gaze of others, by the expectations of the group, by the need to prove something with every word or gesture. I was free, and this freedom was not fleeting. It was solid, rooted in the certainty that I had found a real purpose. Every step I took on this new path was sustained by the peace I had received, a peace the world had not given me, and that the world could not take away. And even though the consequences of my past still accompanied me in the form of memories and looks of distrust, I knew I was no longer alone. I knew that the voice that had called me that early morning was still with me, guiding every choice, strengthening every decision, healing every wound. I had begun a journey that was still far from over, but that I now walked with a transformed heart and a freed spirit. And this walk was only beginning, because each day revealed new challenges and new opportunities to live what I never would have believed possible. When I look back and think about everything I lived, the first thing that comes to mind is how much I believed I was far from any possibility of change. I was living proof of someone who seemed unreachable, someone who raised his voice with pride to attack, mock, and ridicule anyone who dared to speak in the name of God. And yet it was precisely in that state of rebellion that I was reached. So that is why today, when I share my story, I do not see it only as a personal account, but as a universal message that can speak to the heart of anyone who listens to me now. Because deep down, it is not only about me, it is about the way the love of Christ goes beyond any barrier, crosses any resistance, and touches even the hardest hearts. I know that many who watch this video may have someone in mind who seems too far away. Someone who rejects faith. Someone who builds walls against everything spiritual. It may be a friend, a son, a brother, a coworker, or even you who hear me now. And I want to say something I learned in a powerful way. No one is too far to be reached by God. It does not matter how many cries against faith have been shouted. It does not matter how many debates, how many arguments, how many offenses have been raised. The love of Christ is not intimidated by resistance. On the contrary, he goes after precisely those who seem most lost. My story makes this very clear. I was convinced I had all the answers, convinced I was right to mock what I did not understand. And yet, God found me not in a crowded temple, but in the silence of my room, in the moment when I was most broken, most confused, and most vulnerable. This shows that there are no unreachable places for him. The love of Christ is able to cross the densest darkness, penetrate the deepest emptiness, and transform the life that seemed most impossible to change. And when I speak about this, I am not bringing only a beautiful memory, I am bringing a powerful truth that can apply directly to your life. Maybe you are wondering if there is still hope for you. Maybe you carry guilt, shame, choices that weigh on your shoulders. Or maybe you look at someone you love and think there is no way out for them, that the cries of rejection and mockery are insurmountable barriers. But I want you to keep this phrase in your heart. No one is too far to be reached by God. I learned that no matter the intensity of our rebellion, no matter how much we try to move away, there is always a hand extended ready to pull us back. The love of Christ is not limited by our ideologies, by our mistakes, by our masks. He goes beyond all of that. He does not look at who we were, but at who we can become when we are transformed by him. And that was exactly what happened to me. What once was anger was transformed into peace. What once was arrogance was transformed into humility. What once was emptiness was transformed into fullness. And this message is not only to inspire, it is to remind you that there is an open way. If you feel distant, know that there is no distance great enough to keep Christ from reaching you. If you have someone close who seems hardened, know that there is no heart too closed that cannot be touched by the love of God. And I say this with the authority of one who has lived this transformation in the flesh. I am not just an isolated example. I am proof that the impossible can happen when grace steps in. That is why, every time I share my story, I do it with the conviction that it is not only about me, it is about you who listen to me, about all those who have ever felt there was no way out, about those who think they have gone too far. Christ is present, he continues calling, continues reaching, continues setting free. And my life is living testimony that this call is real, it is personal, and it is transformative. So as you listen to me now, remember, no one is beyond the reach of God. Not those who shout the loudest against faith, not those who seem unreachable, not even those who appear to live submerged in darkness. The love of Christ is greater than any ideology, greater than any resistance, greater than any mistake. He did not come to silence, but to set free. He did not come to condemn, but to transform. And this is the message I carry today because it is the essence of what reached me, and that can also reach you. And I want these words not to be remembered only as an emotional testimony, but to become a seed inside your heart. Because if God could reach someone like me, someone who seemed to be the most unlikely, then he can reach anyone. That is the truth that sustains everything I say here. The love of Christ surpasses every barrier. And if you allow it, he can change your life the same way he changed mine.
You have just followed this story showing, in a living way, that no one is ever too far to be reached by the love of Christ. The life of Alex Monroe reminds us that even the hardest hearts can be touched when truth reveals itself in a real and powerful way. Maybe, while you were watching, you remembered moments from your own life or people close to you who seem far from faith. This is the proof that God is still working, still calling, still transforming. If you made it this far, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your presence and your time are precious to us. And since you stayed until the end, take this moment to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and in this way strengthen this message so that it reaches even more people. And if this story truly spoke to you, write in the comments the phrase, "I love Jesus." This simple act is a public testimony of what you believe in, and also a sign that you are part of this faith community that is growing every day. And get ready, because I have a surprise for you. Right now, the next video is appearing on your screen. He challenged Charlie Kirk and found the truth, leaving extremism, real Christian testimony. I guarantee you will not want to miss it, because this story is even more impactful and full of revelations that will deeply touch your heart. Click now, because the journey continues and you will be surprised at what God can do in lives that once seemed completely lost. See you there.